We're going.
Good evening. Welcome to a special edition of Community and Technology, where we connect the global community. I'm here with our executive producer, Doug Frazier, with Lena Marvin on the board, and I'm Stu Reed. Welcome. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about some of this behind-the-scenes stuff with technology. That is the business of the business, the financing of technology in business, and in particular, community development and empowerment, and how and where we are in the scheme of things in technology. Doug, welcome.
Well, thank you.
Lena, welcome.
Why, hello.
Okay. I guess to kick things off, I just want to mention that Frazier and I have been involved in business technology and business development for almost 3 decades now. And we spent a lot of time at the knees of a venture capitalist, one of the foremost venture capitalists in the country, where we learned a lot about business formation, business development, capital formation, and wealth creation for people of color. And one of the things we want to talk about today is some of the things that we are observing in the landscape today. What's going on in terms of economic opportunity and development in our communities. Doug, you want to kick it off?
Okay. Well, I'm really interested in really discussing, looking at some of the the outcomes that we see here surrounding technology and economic development. About 3 years ago, we had up here at the station John Liu, who at that time was the controller of New York City, and in fact, he made mention that he was the only controller. And I don't know if this is true of Scott Stringer, but at that time, he said he was the only controller who was actually an accountant. And I was a little stunned by that, because you don't have to be accountant to be the controller of
That's amazing.
$72 billion entity. That probably would not happen anywhere else. But it brings to mind the kind of, as I was speaking to Lena earlier today, it brings to mind the kind of ways or the cultural mores of how the city works. So you have a city government that is the largest purchaser of services in town. 17, New York City spends 17, according to John Liu, $17 billion. That's $1 million 17,000 times. For those of you who are not basketball players or sports fanatics. But so just so you have an idea of that, $1 million, if you saw the movie Casino, $1 million is 20 pounds of $100 bills. So if you took $100 bills, a stack of $100 bills, and weighed them on the thing, a scale 20, that's how they weighed money in the movie Casino in Vegas. They weigh the money.
And $1 billion is 1,000 times that million.
Right.
And the city of New York spends how much on outside?
$17 billion every 12 months. So every 12 months they're spending their largest purchaser of services. John Liu pointed out that 98% of that money goes to one specific group of people, one gender, one select gender of people. And it brought to mind that one of the things that we really need in the city is income. And most people, in order to live and by the way, there's been a study, and 54% of all the people in this country live in cities. So we're no longer officially agrarian. 54% of everybody in this country lives in a city. And so you need income to live. Now, when you talk to a lot of people in our communities, you hear them saying things like, I got to get a job. No, you need income. You don't need a job, you need income. And a job is one way to get income.
That's just one way, but we've kind of been programmed to think that way.
I don't know what kind of you're being nice, but I don't know where. I think we have been told, and that is part of the culture in this country, that you have to have a job, and everybody's not going to get a job, and it's not a job for everyone. But if the city is spending $17 billion a year. And what you need to have, in my opinion, and what we've seen over the years, is that you need to have you need to have a way where people have an opportunity to get income. And there should be innovation in the city. And this is the one place where there is no innovation, is the city, in the city government. And I don't know why. And as I was saying to Lena earlier, I don't know what the reasons are why they continue to have the same outcome over and over again. Maybe they're morons. Maybe that's just how the world works. But if you're not in that one small group, specific group that is of one race and one gender, you're not going to get anything. And they take tax money from everyone. So they don't just go around and take indiscriminate. They don't just go down indiscriminately deciding that, I'm not going to take your tax. They indiscriminately take everybody's tax money.
Well, let me ask you this, Doug. The new mayor, de Blasio, made a lot of fanfare about income inequality and the haves and the have-nots and a tale of two cities, underscoring exactly what you're saying. Have we seen action from him? You're talking about different outcomes. Have we seen any action from him or his administration that indicates that they may be looking for some other outcomes?
Well, they've been talking, and one of the things that over the years that we've been doing this, not any of them have done any talking about the disparity, according to John Liu, in the way that the income is laid out. Now, de Blasio did make a pledge that they were going to spend $1.7 billion over the next 10 years. And he's only going to be in office, he only could be in office for 4 years at a time. So
8 years in total, unless you're named Bloomberg.
Again, but he's still only going to be there 4 years at a time. He might do the Bloomberg and be there for 30,000 years, but we don't know that. But he's made a pledge to spend $1.7 billion with people who are not in that one specific gender group. And,
But that's over a period of years, you say, right?
Over a period of 10 years.
Wow.
And he only can be there 4 years at a time. So I don't know how realistic, that is. And it's just a goal. It's not a law. It's not a rule. It's not a permutation.
It's not a mandate in any sense.
None of that. It's just, here's a goal, Gola. And I mean, we all have goals. But so you're not going to get certainty with that. So what you got to have is you got to figure out a way to take advantage of the way that the system works. And you have to understand that there's a lot of paternalism going on where the economics of everything is benefited by a certain group of people. Even when they come in to do something to help poor people and people who are suffering from income inequality, it's been our experience that when you look at how they do that, the economic benefit always goes to that one particular group of same gender and same race. They all the time. And even though they take tax money for everybody.
I feel like it would be helpful to just say white men in this situation.
Well, you're white.
I'm going to go ahead and say that.
You're white, so you can say it.
Okay, then I'm saying it.
Well,
because
good.
I feel comfortable with that. Because the thing is you can look at the boards of the people who are getting paid, and you can go, oh, I see a disparity in representation, particularly if you're looking at, companies in New York City where you're like, this doesn't reflect the people who live here.
Forget the companies, look at the city government.
Yeah.
You don't have to look at the companies, I give them a pass because one thing Stu and I have learned over the years of venture capital is when you can raise money for your own private commercial venture, you can basically do anything you want as long as your investors are happy with it. And you don't have to be fair to anyone or anything. But when you have a city government that has a policy or that has an outcome that continue to allow one group of people to always win everything or one group of people always get the economic benefit, I think that doesn't bode well for the kind of society that you really want to have. You want people to have income, and you want everybody to be participants, and you want everybody to be on the team. And even though the mayor raised the issue of income inequality, he has only a goal.
Doug, you use the term paternalism as it relates to economic opportunity for folks of color. Exactly what does that mean? In my mind, it conjures up dad deciding what's good for you and giving it to you, like in your allowance. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, I'm talking about something greater than that. So if there's a problem in a low-income community, what the city will do, and the city fathers, they'll come in, they'll decide what the problem is. They'll bring in their little busy worker bees, and they'll buzz all around, bzz, and they will decide what the problem is. They will have something called a request for information. They will control the whole process, the whole procurement and the whole process. And then at the end of the day, when you look at the outcome, the economic benefit is going to go to one group. The paternalism part of it is that the people that they're helping, oh, you should be happy. Mm-hmm. Oh, we're going to give internet, say for instance like internet, we're going to have internet for $5 or for $10 or even for free. But the people who are going to provide that don't look like the people in the community. The people who are in charge of that don't look like the people in the community, don't look like the people, the poor, and the people in the community are never going to rise above that because of paternalism. So if they really wanted to do that, they would have equality, they would have equity. And equity doesn't always mean that I have a share in a house or equity in my home. Equity can often mean that the fairly distribution of goods and services. And the city government should be the most innovative and most creative thing around in terms of doing new things to help people. I'll give you an example. The New York City Housing Authority, largest landlord in the United States. You could put the city of Boston inside of there, or the city of Atlanta. Half of the people who live there don't have a job. And nobody seems to think that it means anything. And every time they talk about something that needs to be done, we see paternalism. We see that the residents are not involved. They're getting something special and they should be happy, even though they have no chance. They're losers. And when I keep thinking about how when I was in college, I took a class called Rising in the City, where we studied every riot in this country. From, up until, I went to college in the 80s, but up until that point, we studied every riot, not none of the later riots. And all of them had the same thing. They had the same elements that we see today. With people, and they weren't always, all the riots weren't of people of color. There were riots of white people and white men throughout history, in the early parts. So all the riots haven't been with people who are black or Spanish. And all of them who have rioted because they felt that they weren't being treated fairly. They knew they weren't being treated fairly, and the system was always working against them. And no matter how much they complained and how much they talked, nothing was never done. Does this sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Okay, so, and again, when you have a capitalist system, what people don't realize is that capitalism is about winning and losing. And so that means that somebody has to lose. And one thing about this culture in this country, nobody wants to be a loser. But a lot of us are losers in a lot of different ways, in a lot of things. And economically, to live in a city where was the $72 billion budget, and most people of color, women of all colors, are not getting anything, are not being allowed to participate. What are we here for? We're here to be the little worker bees, buzz all around, complain that we're not getting any honey or no nectar from the flowers. And, we're stuck. And what you need to have is some creative way of sharing the pie, of getting people equity so that people would have income. That's what you need.
Let me just let our listeners know. Please call in and join the conversation. We're here at 212-650-6903. You can also check us out on the web at whcr.org. Join us. Come in. Lena.
Yeah.
What do you think about what Doug has said in terms of your experience here? I know you're not a native New Yorker.
I am not a native New Yorker,
mm-hmm.
but so speaking to that, there's this thing about how much the city is purchasing. And so I work within a city apparatus. I see some of how they buy things. And part of what's interesting about how things are bought is the purchasing systems set up by the state, like the actual tools they're used. So my specific example is I work in a library. Mm-hmm. How does the library buy databases? It is so archaic. It's so controlling. The only way to buy things is through these predetermined, pre-authorized paths. And looking at it, there's no innovation inside of it because they've tried in ways to protect what the state is buying. They try to say, okay, we can only buy from people who've won these contracts. But the whole system is so complicated, archaic, and also really is set up for the people who have those contracts, which is this, I'm going to go with, which is this minority of things owned by and controlled by white guys.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying the design of these systems is purposeful?
Well, it's not. The trick is, when you're looking at the purpose of the systems themselves, the purpose and the outcome are two different things. The purpose is to protect the state from being given an overpriced product. Like, the contract is supposed to protect the state. But what happens is the contracts are only going to the population. So the outcome and the purpose are two different things. Mm-hmm. The way it's built, though, is part of what I have a problem with, because the infrastructure surrounding purchasing from inside the state, because, they have this, what was it, $17 billion,
according to John Luder.
So that's for purchasing, $17 billion for purchasing. There's no way for that $17 billion to get to companies run by people of color. For women.
Or white women.
Unless those companies win this state contract, which can only happen if, and it comes to this point where you're like, well, if the only way that these companies can get this leg up, and having those contracts is a huge win. Like, it's wonderful to have the contracts, because you become the only game in town for this $17 billion. So it's partially the infrastructure itself, which is not built to be harmful. It's supposed to help the state. But when you look at helps the state, the outcome is...
the outcome.
It's all about the outcome. Mm-hmm. When you really drill down to it, I can remember Stu and I winning along with the radio station and some New York City Housing Authority Resident Association, we won a state contract to provide broadband build the experimental broadband system around the state, around the city, and and we did it, and we signed a regular contract. And then one day the state called us up. In fact, one day we called them up and said, okay, our contract says that we have to spend 10% of the contract with minorities. Who do we talk to? Who's the minorities? Mm-hmm. Well, that was five years ago. We never heard back from them. And in fact, we actually won an award from them for being minority vendors, even though we weren't one.
Yeah, the point that I think Doug is making is that they
can't see past it.
Their rubric and their rules and procedures did not even consider the fact that the primary contractor would be people of color.
So when we won it, they were stupefied, astounded is the real word, and I'll never forget getting the award from them for being an MWBE, and we had never signed up to be one of those, and we were really we were really taken aback by the notion that the system is, like you said, set up so that they protect. Have you ever seen Blazing Saddles? And you remember in Blazing Saddles, what the governor got up and said, which is Mel Brooks said, we got to protect our phony baloney jobs. So, so what happens is, you're right, Lena, what happens is that the people who are winning are protecting the win. And the outcome part, because again, how could you have a system that says, okay, I'm a white guy, and my daughter, my sister, and my mother is a minority? Now, this is just for economics.
Here's my favorite thing. The term minority, there are more women than men.
Thank you.
So what does this term minority mean? It means underprivileged. It doesn't mean there's less of you. It's supposed to, like, the word minority is supposed to be number-wise. But in New York City, in the world, women are not the minority.
Okay,
in New York
Nor
City,
are people of color.
People of color are not the minority.
We're the majority in the world as well.
So when you look at that and you start going, what's this minority mean? The word is used to distract.
Well, as long as you are, or people are entertaining the notion that what's being put down is what's real, then you're going to have the issues because they have to protect their winningness. And if you want to be, and there's no other way around it, they're going to continue to protect their winning. And again, like I said, no one wants to be a loser. So what you'll have is that people who will sit there and say, well, I'd like to be a part of that. Well, they don't care if you're a part of it because you have to look at what the outcome. And if somebody in city government looked around and said, well, the outcome, because when you think about it, in South Africa, when they had apartheid, you had to get certified in order to work. So if you want to be an MWB, you got to get certified. You only had one group of people in the South.
What's an MWB?
Minority Women's and Business Enterprise.
Okay.
So if you were that, this is what the rubric that the city uses to distinguish the group that always wins and everybody else. So when you had South Africa, you look at the parallels. When you had South Africa, one group of people had to get certified. You have that here. One group of people all looked the same way. You have that here. The only winners were people who looked a certain way. You have that here, economically. And until people realize that in a capitalist society, there are going to be winners and losers, and the only way you're going to resolve that is through equity, then you're going to continue to have this winning and losing. And again, nobody who wants to be a loser.
Yeah, I think you make a powerful point, Doug, that, it's so obvious, but, I'm just repeating it again. For decades we fought for civil rights here in this country.
Economic rights.
And you bring up the example of South Africa, where they fought for civil rights and won. Nelson Mandela got released from prison, became the president of the country, but what happened economically? Was there any economic redistribution, reorganization? The answer is no. The economics there is still the same. So I'm just underscoring what you're saying. What we need here is economic rights. We need a change in the economic distribution of wealth and economic opportunity here in this country.
And what you really need is not to have people complaining. When I say complaining, not to have people who will decide that, there's a white lady over there and she's an MWB and she's getting more than me, arguing about crumbs. Instead of really looking at the whole pie and the big picture and saying to yourself, wait a minute, if we have $17 billion on purchasing services and what you never ever see in this town, nobody ever peels back the onion or pull back the cover and says, this is how the process works, and this is who's making the process, who's making the decisions in the process. Because if they did that, I think we would all be stunned. If you went and looked and said, well, what is the racial makeup of and the gender makeup of the people who are making the decisions for procurement? I think people would be shocked because I don't think they look anything like the people who are walking around, the majority of people who are walking around. Mm-hmm. You're not going to have that.
I agree with you. And the flip side of that is, back to your paternalism comment, the services and goods that those folks are buying, they're getting paid to deliver, I should say, are being delivered to women and people of color predominantly.
Right.
So we're the recipients of their largesse, we're the recipients of their paternalism, but we are not involved in the process of
they're the economic recipients of their so-called largesse to people, to these groups. And the system continues to work like that. And people should be, I think, a little concerned because the taxpayers' money, that's our money. Mm-hmm. It's not these people's money. And I can recall, we were ourselves in a meeting, and we were told that they had decided to go one way, and they had a lady in the room with us who was a lawyer, a nice lady, who was just there to make sure that you and I didn't say anything or do anything crazy. And when we got up and said, the meeting's over because we see that, there's nothing to gain here, the lady followed the lawyer. She's a lawyer. She followed me and Stu out to the elevator and said, said to Stu, I wouldn't even look at her. And she said, I'm going to find out what happened. And Stu looked at her and said, we already know what happened.
Right.
You guys have done what you've always done.
And back to your early statement, we really don't even care.
No.
Why it happened.
No, you sure didn't.
It's all about the outcome.
The outcome.
The outcome.
So do you guys view technology as a potentially disruptive force
Correct.
in this system.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So what does that look like? Like, what does it mean to disrupt this system of inequality with technology?
Well, okay, so if you, us, we went and we built a experimental wireless network around the city with over 500 nodes. Nodes are access points or places where you can actually get on the internet. And we did that and completed that in 2010. And we used mostly high school kids.
Very cool.
And most people said, "You can't do that, those high school kids." And I can never forget one kid, true story. A kid walked in, knocked on the door of the office who had heard about the other kids working. He came into the office and he took out a matchbook and he said, "I want to speak to so-and-so." And the guy who was talking about was sitting in the room with us. But he was reading off a matchbook. So I looked at him, I said, go on back outside and get your stuff together and see if you can memorize the person's name and then come back. And the kid looked at me and said, "Are you disrespecting me?" So I said, "Get out." So he left. He was very angry. But I went out behind him. And I said to him in the hallway by the elevator, I said, "No one can disrespect you if they don't know you. You got to know somebody to disrespect them because you got to find out what makes them mad." So I said, "So I can't disrespect you because I don't know you. All I'm saying to you is that if you want to come in and make a good impression, read the name first. Learn the name. You had a chance to come on and learn the name." I said, "So get on the elevator, go downstairs, learn the name, and come back upstairs and knock on the door. And let's act like it didn't happen." And he did. And he stayed with us all summer.
Nice.
And he learned. So, but my point is that people will learn. People will adapt if they have the opportunity, if they think that there's income. And by the way, the state paid for all of those kids, and they didn't come to us and say, "Oh, you got to have a program." We decided to do that.
Sure.
We decided that we were going to train them and teach them because we knew that people need income and people need an opportunity, and everybody's not going to get a job. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And the sooner people realize that, the better understanding they'll have that the need for equity. The need to be a part of the society. The need when you have all of these politicians and people who look like us and some who don't, but who are in position where they can do something, it's incumbent upon us to demand from them that they do something to help because the city spends like drunken sailors. I'm serious. I mean, I don't think maybe people don't like that analogy, but they spend money like drunken sailors.
See, what's funny is I think they spend money like a horrifying bureaucracy that's been off of its rocker for more than 100 years.
No, that's been off its meds.
because the way it moves, like the way money moves, it's not like it's gushing out of the city. Oh no, it's being piped very specifically.
Specific people.
Right.
That's right.
The infrastructure, the way it works. Now, that's not to say that those things don't occasionally break. There have been points at which my library wanted to pay something, and the state was like, "Oh no, we've decided we're not paying them anymore. You can't get services from this spot." And it's like, well, wait, what happened? And all of that is behind the scenes in a way that is impenetrable. And this is when you want to get things that are needed.
That's right.
So you can't even always get things that are needed, but it's so archaic. So there's a part of me that's like, I feel like if we put newer, like innovative technologies into some of this infrastructure, and then they did, and it was horrible. They built us this whole new system of procurement that just it's because of how it was procured. It was the infrastructure of contract.
I'd like to get back to your point, your question about technology. How can it be a disruptive force in society? Yes. And I think at its core, it is in that the new technology puts communication, access, and information in the hands of everyday people.
Well, transparency.
Yeah, I think that is an astounding transformation, and not just connected across the street to the next city. This is a global network. I'm talking about the internet, of course. Is a transformative communications apparatus that has the potential to educate, inform, and empower people if we grab hold of it.
Well, it's interesting that you said that because we were both on a TV show a few months back where they brought Stu and I in to talk about net neutrality. This is when net neutrality first happened. And we made the case that net neutrality was all about Netflix and the unfair advantage. Now, people, since have tried to make it into it was all about something else. But that's really what it's all about. It was all about
break that down. What's that mean? Break that down for our listeners.
Well, okay, so Netflix has 40 million people paying them at least $8 a month, and they're using the internet infrastructure as their mode of delivery.
That's as big as Comcast or Cablevision or Time Warner, isn't it?
Everybody, including John Malone, are all now rounding the wagons and following Reed, whatever his name is, the guy that runs the Netflix. They're all following him because he has figured out how to be a global major player, and he's bending down to no one. So what you saw with this whole net neutrality thing was a way for again, like you said, Lena, the incumbents to try to do the Janet Jackson control. Because that's what it's all about. The unfair advantage means that you have control.
So I'm going to disagree with only a tiny part of what you were saying. So why people started getting into net neutrality, I agree. The big players are Netflix and other people, but
who's bigger than them?
Well, no one's bigger. But what I'm saying is, there is one other little kernel of concern that exists in a world without net neutrality, and that's the idea of toll bridges to stuff people don't want you looking at. Because that's the other thing, and it's not just a toll bridge to Netflix. It's an opening of a gate to certain kinds of monetary censorship, which is a potential of danger. Now, I'm not saying that the big fight isn't just Netflix, but what we're lucky in this is that Netflix didn't just go, well, I'm a big player, I'm going to make a deal with this guy, and move on.
They did.
But
they did that.
They also, there's enough push for the notion of net neutrality that they are pushing at least a little bit, not enough, but some, to have no toll gates, to not have if you want to get to this part of the internet, it costs more. Because that's my concern. I don't want to be costed.
Well, first of all, what you have to take into account, what they always do, and this is a tried and true technique, they use the boogeyman effect. Oh, there's going to be tolls all over the place. But that's all smoke and mirrors, because what they were concerned about was the guy who had 40 million people paying him $8 a month, and he didn't have any infrastructure, and he was riding on these other guys' network, according to them, and they wanted that to stop. So they went to the mat. They wouldn't go to the mat if there was going to be a toll on a small bridge in Iowa, for instance. They wouldn't care.
The thing is they want to make the tolls. Like Comcast, Time Warner, those are the people who were afraid of making the tolls.
The argument that we made was Comcast and them don't care about a bridge, the Ben Franklin Bridge, because we worked in Philadelphia. So the Ben Franklin Bridge is like the George Washington Bridge. They don't care, and Comcast headquarters is in Philadelphia. So they don't care about the toll on the. They get paid.
No. They'd be making the tolls. That's the fear is not Comcast is going to have to pay tolls. No. It's Comcast going, okay, there's 3 kinds of internet. There's internet where you can get this stage at these speeds. There's internet where you can get this stage and we get paid more. And this other stage where we get paid even more. That tier system, which is still around.
Right. We agree.
But
we agree.
That's where net neutrality.
You guys are just talking two sides of the same apparatus.
We agree.
Doug is talking about the political rationale and motivation for why it became an issue.
It wouldn't have been an issue without Netflix.
All right, so I hang
because
out.
Everything was free before
and
that.
Lena, you're talking about the impact of what would happen or what could happen as how that political issue was adjudicated.
I guess it's just that I know 3 nerds who don't care about Netflix and are just...
But see, when we were there, we had to make, the question came, well, what is Netflix? And we said, forget about what is the net neutrality. I said, forget it. You would need to know is why they all of a sudden they want tolls. Why? Why all of a sudden out of the wide world of the internet, they decided that they wanted that because they're business people, and they looked and said, this guy's making a ton of money. And dig this, their video cable business, it's non-existent. It's almost passé now. So that's what they were fighting to protect. And most people didn't zero in on that because, again, there's so many ways that it can affect us because the internet is probably the first system that has come along where none of the governments around the world, municipalities, white guys, can control it.
Or corporations.
They can't control it because by the very definition of how it's set up, they couldn't. One group couldn't control it, and that's been proven.
It doesn't stop individual countries from putting some horrifying mechanisms in them.
Well,
Because people want the
that's
internet.
right.
People want to think of the
That's
internet
right.
as just a safe place, and I kind of want
Right.
to back off that a little bit because there are corners of the internet where you're just like, oh, the Great Firewall of China, or the entire censorship of the internet out of the United Arab Emirates, or other things where it start. So I
you're
don't
right.
disagree,
No,
but
you're right.
I do want to. I
No,
do
you're right.
want to highlight that there is this kind of crust
That's right.
of weak points
That's
where
right.
while the whole thing can't be controlled because of how the technology
Well,
works,
here's what
with the exception of the backbone spots of the internet,
Well, here's what
which
they
you
do.
disrupt with
That's
mesh
right.
networks.
That's right. Well, see, but here's what they do in those countries, and here's how they do it, because you're absolutely right. What they do is they stop the outflow of information going in and out of the country. That's how those countries have said, okay, China or whatever, we're going to stop people from doing stuff. So what they do is they said they go to where the internet connection out of their country go because they control it, and they stop that. But mesh networks inside of the country, people were still able to communicate using other than. This is how disrupted the technology. This is why they're so fearful of these particular things, because people can now communicate with themselves instead of looking at it and saying, you know what, this is a great tool. Why don't we figure out how to give people equity? Why don't we figure out how to get everyone involved? And why does everything have to be commercialized? And see, that's one of the problems of capitalism. You have to have winners and losers. And I'll give you a classic example. So at one time, we had decided that we had gotten some good coverage on this. We had decided that the phone company was going to move from copper to Fios early on.
To fiber.
To fiber. So what we said was, oh, wow, there's a lot of copper laying around the world. That stuff could be used because they didn't want it anymore. So we found a company that made a service where you could use copper lines to deliver
Broadband speeds.
telephone, internet, and TV. So we actually got together and built the whole this community in the Bronx, a small community of 40-something buildings, and we built something called VDSL, which is a very fast digital subscriber line, VDSL. And we built the thing, and it had a box. It was a thing. This thing was wonderful. We actually got written up and featured in IEEE, the worldwide, guy came in, took pictures of us. I mean, Stu wasn't there that day.
I don't know how he arranged that.
I don't know how
somehow.
I did that somehow. So they took our pictures, and we had people come from Japan to visit the service. So guess what happened? Motorola decided that they needed to get part of the $15 billion that Verizon was going to spend on Fios. They brought the company that was making this equipment that we were using, and they shut it down. They shut it down. They said, you know what? So my point is that there's a lot of technologies that could be good for people, but because of capitalism and because of commercialism, they may not be there because some company may decide, which is their want, that, I'm going to buy this and shut it down.
Yeah, because they
can.
Because to be winners, they produce more losers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Got
So
it,
that's
okay.
what people need to understand, that in a capitalist society, there are winners and losers, and if you're automatically going to know if you're a winner or not, because all you have to do is look down and look at your shoes and look in your pocket.
Yeah.
And you'll go, I'm not a winner. So if you take and use what we've learned, the city government is the one place where that's our money, where there should be innovation. You should not have the largest landlord here in the United States that's in New York City, and half of the people there don't even have a job. You shouldn't have that. You shouldn't be spending. You shouldn't have a system that has an outcome that spends $17 billion every 12 months, and only one group of people benefit from that. And that money comes from everybody. And people say nothing. They don't even. I mean, if your husband or your roommate in your house goes into the kitchen and eats all the bread or drinks all the milk, you're going to say something to them.
That's true.
you're going to say something, even though it doesn't make any sense because they already drank the milk and ate the bread.
Well, the hope is that they won't do it next time. That's why you say something.
Well, how come, or why come nobody's saying something to the municipality and saying to them, hey, guess what, guys? We need to make sure that other people are a part of the thing, and we need to not have paternalism.
Or maternalism.
Or maternalism, yeah. Well, maternalism might be nice because that would be different.
Oppressive systems of power are very irritating to the people who are being controlled against their will.
Well, okay, so if you have if you have a democracy, if you have a place where people can say, like this great country where people can say and do it and say things that they want, you could do what you want as long as you're not disturbing or doing something illegal, then people should be cognizant, because if you have children, you want your children not to be losers. So, like I got a couple of nephews, and I see my nephews sometimes when they were younger hanging around in front of the building with their friends, and I would always go to them, oh, you're over there in Loserville, huh? Just standing around waiting for a parade. Because they have no opportunity. And they're not alone. You know what I mean? They're not alone. I mean, they just so happen that these are young black guys, but they're not alone. There are a whole lot of people of all colors, of all gender, who don't have opportunities in this country. I mean, all across the whole country. And again, nobody says anything. Nobody speaks up for them. Nobody advocates for them. What we do get is paternalism and maybe maternalism, and people giving lip service to things that they're going to do. As like, oh, we're going to give people $10, chicken sauce, or $10 internet, for instance. Well, if you're a poor person, I don't care if the internet is $5 or $3. If you're making $1 and $2 decisions every day, I don't care how low you make the price, it won't matter to you. It won't matter. And people don't, it's astounding to me that, people will spend, and me and Stu talked about this earlier, you'll see people spending all this time talking about NBA and baseball and football, and you got radio stations that just talk about sports all the time, and there's nothing there.
Well, there's lots of things that are very interesting there if that's the field you want to look at. I've got to say, it is much, much less depressing to hear about somebody playing sport ball than it is to hear about systematic inequality.
Your own life.
Like, that too. It's an escape. So I understand why people enjoy sport ball. I get it, but you can't live in that fantasy world.
Right.
You've got to touch down.
Okay, let me just interrupt. We're going to take a break for a moment. And when we come back, we're going to talk some more about some possible solutions, some way to use this disruptive technology, these disruptive technologies, to bring some equity to our communities, to our folks. Join us at 212-650-6903. Be right
Identity
back.
theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in the United States. Every year, 15 million residents in the United States have their identities stolen. Sometimes there is no way to prevent identity theft, but there are some precautions you can take. Number 1, never share personal information like your social security number with anyone. Number 2, pay attention to your surroundings and your belongings. Number 3, only keep essentials in your wallet or purse. Number 4, monitor your bank and credit card accounts weekly, if not daily. Number 5, get copies of your credit report at least twice a year. Number 6, shred all documents that have your address and account numbers on them. If your identity has been stolen, there are immediate steps you can take to repair the damage. Go to www.consumer.ftc.gov and type in identity theft for instructions.
Texting while driving is dangerous. The driver who is texting is distracted, putting himself, pedestrians, and other drivers at risk. Statistics show that 25% of all car accidents, or 1 million car crashes a year, involve a distracted driver. In 2012, 3,500 people were killed and 400,000 were injured due to distracted drivers. It never makes sense to read and text while driving, so if it's an emergency that you have to make a phone call, in some cars, you can pair the car's Bluetooth with your cell phone and keep your hands free. So please, for the safety of you and everyone around you, keep your eyes on the road and not on your phone.
Hello, and welcome to today's lottery drawing. Good luck. And here's today's winning numbers. First one up, it's not yours. Second one, not yours. And another number that's not yours. Okay, this is one number that's yours. It's a 5, but you don't get any money for that. And the final number is not yours.
Yep, so chances are you're not going to hit the lottery anytime soon. Don't get us wrong, the lottery can be fun every now and then. Just please don't rely on it for your future savings. How about this? Brew your own coffee at home instead of buying that latte every day. Brown bag it to work instead of ordering in. Ride your bike instead of buying all that gas. These changes alone can save you thousands a year. Thousands. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feed that piggy bank. Go to feedthepig.org for more free ideas on how to save. Feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants and the Ad Council.
Okay, we're back. Stu and Lena, community and technology, connecting the global community. We're talking about technology as a disruptive force, as a potential tool to empower and bring equity to our communities. Earlier we were talking, and I made the statement, I don't know if you guys agree, that the internet is an incredibly disruptive technology in that it is a way for us to connect with each other globally. Lena made the point that some firewalls have been put up in some countries that limit the inflow and the outflow
Just that
that
it's
country.
not perfect.
Yeah, I understand. But then,
It's still a system of disruption.
but then Doug brought back the point. Well, okay, well, even within those countries that may be cut off to some degree from the outside, they still have access to all kinds of communications within that country. I mean, you look at something like the Arab Spring and the way that cell phones and Twitter and social media.
I've actually heard a lot of discussion countering the idea that the Arabs, folks.
Well, Egypt's not doing too good today.
Well, the thing is that folks around here are really excited about the idea that Twitter did something in the Arab Spring, and it seems that it may not be as much of Twitter's revolution so much as it was a tool for communication, and that's good.
I think people did something. I don't think Twitter did a damn thing.
The thing is that people absolutely did something, and the narrative that we like to wrap around it here is that it's because they, it was so successful because they had this technology, and that's not true.
Yeah, I think technology is the backstory. It's a platform, but it's not the story. It's an enabler.
And Twitter wasn't the only technology.
Right.
There's probably other things.
I mean,
Open Garden or something.
My favorite tech was that when the government started systematically shutting down different points of access, people started using dial-up to get the same stuff out. But that was only a small part of a much bigger story. But the idea that it's... I don't think it's... in these instances that are so shiny, I think it's the fact that individuals are getting a voice, a platform, and community over a long term that can make them feel less alone and less like they deserve their lot. That's something I think is happening with this communication device. Because when people come together and they say, oh, I also have it bad in this way. And when they can come together and find more and more people, that's when you start going, oh, well, maybe a lot of people shouldn't have it so bad.
I think you're hitting it right on the head, Lena. From where I sit, it is a connectivity of people that results in consciousness raising. I believe that long haul, that's our only way home. That it's not going to come from politicians or government or business, but it's going to come from people whose minds finally evolve to the point where they realize we are all one, we're all connected, we all share this planet together, and we all have so many needs and concerns in common that we really got to start thinking about each other and raise our level of behavior on a global basis.
Wow, Stu, utopianism, Stu. I'm impressed.
Well, I mean, it's something to aim for. And,
yes, it is.
And again, I think this technology is the beginning. I think, Lena, you're right. It's about the long haul, and it's about just the fact that people are connected.
Being in continuous touch with your cohorts, with whatever your community is, there is a strength in that. And the ability, part of what's just disruptive about technology is people used to say, I will meet you at this place at this time. And now people say, I'll text you when I'm there. Not you. The coordination, this lowering of the bar of like how much you have to kind of manually do and prepare for it. There are people who think that weakens people, and there are people who thinks that strengthens. I'm on the strength side.
Well, think about this. In the history of the country, there have always been changes in the culture and the way that people communicate with each other and how they communicate. That has always been a part of what's going on. What's really, to me, different is that no one has really taken the time to look at what happens with the economic engine, the capitalistic engine, and how you make changes to that raises people's consciousness. That's always snowed under, that's always talked around, that's always mitigated with paternalism or maternalism, and at the same time, the benefit continues to be what it is. And until you figure out how to change the culture, because cultural changes have happened in this country. We've had cultural changes. We've had changes when we had a depression and nobody had nothing. Can you help? Brother, can you spend a spare dime? We've had those things happen. But it's just that once you reach the kind of prosperity that you've seen, then the people who are winning, they don't see any need to change anything. They don't see any need to use the people who are the quote unquote losers. What do they need them for? They don't need them for, and if you stick to the whole notion of jobs, there's 500 applicants for every one job.
Yeah, they need those less and less.
Yeah, so they don't even have enough jobs for their buddies and their friends.
So you asked before that I speak to the idea of safety net and innovation. The idea if people had income without jobs, there are people who think they wouldn't do anything. I am not one of those people. I think if people have income and they will then start innovating. Like they can then go out and start doing without being afraid they're not going to be able to eat. Like a basic level of income results in a more innovative society. Now, that's not a view everyone holds. I think it might be a view everyone in this room holds, though.
Yeah,
well, if you go to the winners and who are not the losers, they don't. Why would they? They don't like it.
Well, they don't realize. They think that their winning is related to the fact that they've worked, and it's like that's not it. You're not special. You are inside of an apparatus that brought you somewhere. This same apparatus is holding other people down. Look at the system.
I think they know that.
Yeah, I don't think all of them do.
Well, the very small percentage at the top, I think they do. That's why they fight so hard to keep it that way.
Yeah, they're very. I mean, people don't want to give them credit for being on the top. People don't want to do that because people are so busy trying to, wishing and dreaming that they may become one of those people, that they don't think far enough to realize that the people on the top, they didn't get on the top by being stupid. They got on the top because they had an unfair advantage most of the times.
Yeah.
Very, but when you just look at the pure numbers, that's what works against you. I mean, again, in this country, there are 14,000 or so neurosurgeons, 406 NBA players. There's no channels on the TV or radio to talk about contracts of neurosurgeons and what hospitals pay the most and who's a free agent and who's not.
But there are online communities. So I will say at least there's that.
I'm just saying,
we've only got a few minutes left in the show, and during that time, I'd like to talk a little bit about, how can we use this technology to level the playing field? We talked about that we all have access to technology. How can we use that to empower and spread some of the equity around that's out there? Do you guys see any way that technology is going to help do that?
Well, I do. I think you got to have three things. The first thing is that you have to vote. You have to shop for democracy, and you have to act like when you're using your vote, you got to act like when you go in the supermarket and buying carrots and meat. you have to be this very distinctive and segregated. So that's A. B, or 2, you have to be demanding. You have to demand that your voice be heard and that whatever is in what your needs are, that they be brought to the table. They don't have to always be the best idea or the greatest idea, but you have to get your idea on the table. And then number 3, most of all, you got to learn how to be a team player, and that's one thing that we don't have a lot of in this particular country, because you got a lot of individualism here. And that's good, but it's not good when you're trying to lift up the group. And if you want to lift the group up, people got to understand what team play is all about. And that's why you don't have a lot of winners here, because there's no team play. And maybe that's part of our fascination with team sports, because people are working together, and that's so bizarrely unusual in this country. Maybe that's why we like that.
What do you think, Lena? Yeah, during the break, we played a PSA that talked about the lottery is not a good way to plan your life. But I go into my neighborhood stores and bodegas, and folks are lined up. And I'm talking about working folks shelling out 20, 30, 40, 50 bucks for the lotto, as though that's their last best chance.
So I like to look at the statistics on the lottery.
Hello.
And you are just as likely to win the lottery with, like, the difference between buying the ticket and not buying the ticket to win the lottery isn't that much. Like, your odds of winning don't increase that much, because they say you got to be in the game to win the game. Actually, you don't. You could go ahead. The chances of picking up a winning lottery ticket that you find on the street is about even. And I have picked up unplayed lottery tickets off the street, because I looked at it, I was like, that doesn't look played, and I took it. It didn't win nothing, but it was unlikely to.
So how do we use technology to change that mindset, though? That's really what I'm trying to get to in the next 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, thanks for the whole 2 minutes. No, you go ahead and you answer yours.
How beneficent.
I mean, I look at it from a much simpler mindset. Know the technology that's around you so you can control it, because there is a certain amount of technology trying to control you. The boob tube, the idea that the television is just trying to pull you in, same with YouTube. It's the idiot box. There's a difference between consumption and production. Choosing to consume less and produce more. I'm not saying don't consume nothing. Obviously, you should be listening to WHCR 90.3 FM. But you should also be producing. You should be putting stuff out there. So that's my solution is learn how to make stuff with tech.
And I know, Doug, you talked about
Wait, what's your solution? Come on, you got 30 seconds.
My solution is education and awareness, raising awareness, raising education about some of the things that we've been talking about here, about the lack of equity, the lack of opportunity, letting folks know that they have a voice, that they have a way to communicate, that they can impact some of the politicians and the decision makers that Doug talked about. They are not in office without our vote. If we let them know that we need equity, we demand equity, we demand a piece of the pie in order for them to be in office, things will start to change. The technology is a tool to help us get there.
So we're going to be here next week talking more tech.
Yes, we are. Community and technology, connecting the global community, will be here next Wednesday. That's July 22nd, 5 p.m., Talking Tech. And coming up, stay tuned for news at 6 p.m. with Joshua Bolden, followed by Nutmeg Jazz in the Middle with Kadir.
Hi, you're listening to WHCR 90.3 FM, New York. Yay!
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I am Joshua Bolden with a look at your latest news and headlines on WHCR 90.3 FM, New York. Let's start with what's happening here locally. Years after being killed in the line of duty inside a Harlem mosque, NYPD officer Philip Cardillo's service to the city is being memorialized. The city named a new police harbor vessel after him. Cardillo was shot while responding to a false report of another officer trapped inside Mosque Number 7 on West 116th Street and Lenox Avenue in 1972. Now, DNA info reports he was attacked by 15 parishioners who were angry an officer was in their sanctuary. During the altercation, he was shot at point-blank range. Cardillo Cardillo was 31, had been on the force 5 years, and just had a child. His son joined Commissioner Bill Braden in the ceremony. Braden compared Cardillo's sacrifice to officers Wenjin Liu and Rafael Ramos, who were killed in their patrol car in Brooklyn in December. Braden said they were attacked and killed not because they were black, not because they were white, but because they were blue. Braden also revealed that the NYPD will dedicate the street leading up to the brand new police academy after Cardillo, so all future officers will know his name. Also happening in Harlem. Picture this, purchasing 2 Calvin Klein suits worth $750, 2 blue fur winter coats worth $1,000, a $350 Louis Vuitton belt, oh, and for flair, a $500 necklace, not from a swanky brand name store, but from the Goodwill. This happened right here in Harlem, folks, and a man has been charged with grand larceny after donating more than $5,000 worth of his roommate's designer clothes to Goodwill. 30-year-old Kenneth Butler was arrested Thursday. DNA info reports that he confessed to police that he donated the items. Butler was renting his living room to a 35-year-old man who kept all of his possessions there. Butler is due in court on October 7th. Saying that far too often the punishment does not fit the crime, President Barack Obama is calling on Congress to reform the nation's criminal justice system.
Our criminal justice system isn't as smart as it should be. It's not keeping us as safe as it should be. It is not as fair as it should be. Mass incarceration makes our country worse off. The main difference between me and them is I had a more forgiving environment, so that when I slipped up, when I made a mistake, I had a second chance, and they've got no margin for error.
The president outlined his plan centering on nonviolent crimes while speaking at the NAACP convention in Philadelphia Tuesday. The president said there is a need to invest in communities, especially its children, and a need to lower long mandatory sentences. He said judges and prosecutors should be able to use their discretion in the courtrooms to steer young people who make a mistake in better directions and to invest in programs as alternatives to prison.
Our prisons should be a place where we can train people for skills that can help them find a job, not train them to become more hardened criminals.
Going down south now, so the Confederate flag has been removed from the South Carolina state capitol. But in another southern state, there are growing calls for the Confederate flag to be removed from the uniforms and cars of Alabama state troopers. The Huntsville chapter of the NAACP is leading the charge. NAACP member Reverend Robert Shanklin says he is puzzled by the Confederate flag's presence on the uniforms and finds it offensive. The flag is one of 4 emblems that make up the Alabama law enforcement agency seal. Also in Washington, President Barack Obama is defending the Iran nuclear deal.
The comprehensive long-term deal that we achieved with our allies and partners to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon represents a powerful display of American leadership and diplomacy.
In a White House news conference, the president called the deal historic and said it blocks Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. The accord gives Iran relief from international sanctions. Now, the president noted that there will be unprecedented international inspections to ensure compliance by Iran. He warned that a nuclear-armed Iran would be a grave threat to the world. Now, the president also challenged critics by asking, quote, "What is your alternative?" The president insisted that the U.S. and allies will continue to press Iran about its support for terrorism around the world. He argued that the nuclear deal is not contingent on Iran changing its behavior. Congress will have 60 days to review the nuclear accord. The president said he looks forward to a robust debate, but has vowed to veto any attempt to kill the deal. He urged lawmakers to evaluate the deal based on facts, not politics. And as always, we like to toss in a little pop culture on WHCR News. She's had her own sitcom, starred in Cinderella next to Whitney the Voice Houston, won a Grammy, and now she's opening up about the reaction, or lack thereof, when she got on the subway and started singing. I'm talking about Brandy. She tells the New York Post she was sure at least someone would say something, maybe tell her she had potential. Instead, in the video the 36-year-old posted online, hardly anyone looks at her when she belts out the song Home from The Wiz. She can also be heard saying in the video that New Yorkers are rude. Asked about that, she stressed that she doesn't really feel that way and gives some credit to her daughter for helping her put things into perspective. Brandy says her 13-year-old told her, quote, "It's not that New Yorkers are rude. It's just that they thought you were crazy," end quote. And finally, in pop culture, Lauryn Hill is calling off her Thursday night concert in London because she is not allowed to enter the United Kingdom. On Facebook, the singer blames her past legal situation for getting her barred from the country. She looks forward to getting permission to enter the country later this summer. Lauryn served jail time in 2013 for tax evasion. And that's it for news. Now to the Bold Spotlight. A few weeks ago, we talked with Aisha Sekou of Occupy the Corner, an organization that's keeping folks off the street and focused on positive things. In this week's three-part series, we revisit Occupy from another angle. One of Aisha's team members, Beloved, a former shooter who went from spreading violence to spreading peace. Here's part 2 of our interview.
Now here it is, I come around back to Harlem because a guy calls me and he makes a threat that he gonna kill some young guys that I'm raising. So I'm like, what? Chill. Matter of fact, let me get to New York real quick because my brother is a part of that group. So when I get back, I'm at the dude's house. I'm with his mother now. He comes walking through the door and I'm looking at him with the look like, yeah, it was that serious. I don't know if you took my laugh or my smile for granted, but it was that serious. And he was like, yo, I was just going through something. I really didn't want no situation. And I'm looking at him like, well, you're going to have a situation if any one of mine get touched. So he was like, yo, I'm just saying they doing this, they doing that. And I said, yo, think about when we was young. We did the same thing they doing. The only thing different is them, not me and you doing it no more. So he up there, yo, this and that and that. I'm like, yo, I'm not here to try to do nothing to you. I'm just here to let you know how serious that would be if you did that. You know what I'm saying? Not even counting their family and who they roll with. I'm talking about from my state and from my being, that would be horrible for you. And this is how serious it is. I came all the way from Memphis to get down with this. So he was like, oh, okay. So I end up meeting with Sister Aisha at a forum they had in St. Nick housing. And they was talking about gangs. And I said, can people give me the definition of what gang means? And somebody looked it up and it said, organized crime unit, an organized unit where they involve themselves in crimes. I said, now let's do an evaluation on these groups that y'all calling gangs. None of them is able to stay on the street. They constantly get locked up. They don't have a bit of sense, and they moving off of feelings. None of those could add up to being a gangster or being a gang. I said, because if you look at gang is Aryan Nation, people that could bring 150 keys into the United States, people that is known for murdering people and making them disappear, people that are organized with their money. They're not making little hundreds and 500 and you just put all of them together on one case. Each one of them is making over $1 million something. You know what I'm saying? So now when you say our kids is gang, you're labeling them. And I said the same way you're giving them a label is the same way somebody gave me the label as bad news. And guess what? I became bad news. So now you're making our kids become gangs. So now it leaves our kid to either be on probation or either have them with a felony. So that means a felony and a probation or a parole person can't be around each other. So that makes our community what? Segregated. So now you got Sister Aisha on them talking, and I say, yo, Sister Aisha, I'm hearing what you're saying. And y'all talking about these community centers y'all got open and different things like that. But I said, y'all just only giving the shooters places where they could catch them at. Because we not fixing the people that's hurt. Remember, my brother got killed yesterday because you opened up this community center in my neighborhood and the dude that shot my brother is in there. That don't make me stop and go, chill. You know what? They just opened that up. I'm going to chill. No, I'm going to the community center. I'm walking through the door. I'm shooting the dude that shot my brother. So before we can start fixing all these items and these buildings and these places, let's fix these people.
And be sure to tune into the Bold Spotlight tomorrow for more of that interview, and of course WHCR News for your latest headlines. Also, if you have a story idea or just want to drop me a line and say hi, you can reach me by email at joshuaonair@outlook.com. That's joshuaonair@outlook.com. I am Joshua Bolden, and you are listening to the Voice of Harlem, WHCR 90.3 FM New York. Have a fantastic evening, everyone.
And you're listening to Nutmeg Jazz in the Middle.
And that was, hey,